A small, cozy diner sat quietly on the corner of a busy city street. The sun had barely risen, and the morning light painted golden streaks on the windows. Inside, a few regular customers were sipping coffee, wrapped up in their usual routines. A soft hum of conversations blended with the clinking of plates and mugs. Keanu Reeves sat in the farthest booth, his head slightly lowered, a worn leather jacket draped over his shoulders. He was used to the quiet moments like these, places where nobody expected anything from him. His hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee as he gazed out the window, lost in his thoughts. Across the street, a young girl named Emily was sitting on a cracked wooden bench, her little hands wrapped around a sketchbook. Her blonde hair was tangled, her clothes worn and faded. Yet, her face held a brightness that seemed to challenge the dullness around her. As she sketched, she kept glancing back at the diner, her eyes catching glimpses of the man inside. She didn't know who he was, but something about him felt different. Safe, almost like a guardian angel resting between moments. Her hands moved carefully over the paper, drawing the man's face, trying to capture that quiet sadness in his eyes. Suddenly, a rough voice startled her. "Hey, get off that bench, you little rat!" An angry vendor pushed his cart toward her, scowling. Emily scrambled to her feet, clutching her sketchbook tightly against her chest. "I wasn't hurting anyone," she whispered. But the man wasn't listening. He waved his hand dismissively, muttering curses under his breath. From the corner of her eye, Emily noticed the man from the diner standing up. Keanu stepped out, his expression calm but firm. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice steady, but carrying a weight that silenced the vendor immediately. The man mumbled something incoherent before stomping off, dragging his cart behind him. Keanu looked down at the little girl, offering a gentle smile. "You okay?" he asked. Emily nodded, still holding her sketchbook tightly. "Yeah, thank you." Keanu crouched down to her level, noticing the smudges of charcoal on her fingers. "You like drawing?" he asked. Her face brightened as she nodded again, a shy smile forming. "It helps me feel less alone," she whispered. Keanu glanced at the sketchbook and noticed his own face drawn there, perfectly capturing his distant, thoughtful gaze. He couldn't help but chuckle softly. "That's pretty good," he said, pointing to the sketch. Emily looked down, embarrassed. "I just saw you sitting there. You looked like you were thinking about something important." Keanu's smile faded a little, replaced by a thoughtful expression. "Sometimes, yeah," he replied quietly. He glanced around, noticing that Emily seemed hesitant to speak. "You here by yourself?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "My mom's working. She says I should stay out of trouble, but I just like drawing people. They always look different when they don't know someone's watching." Keanu's gaze softened. He could tell that behind her smile was a quiet sadness, one that he knew all too well. Before he could say anything more, Emily's face suddenly paled, and she swayed on her feet. Keanu instinctively reached out, steadying her. "You okay?" he asked, concern clear in his voice. Emily forced a weak smile, trying to act strong. "Just tired, I guess." Keanu didn't believe it for a second, but he didn't push her. Instead, he glanced at the diner behind him. "How about some pancakes?" he offered. Her eyes lit up, and she nodded cautiously. Keanu led her inside, giving a reassuring nod to the curious waitress as they took a seat in the booth he had occupied earlier. As Emily sat down, Keanu noticed her trembling fingers. He kept his tone light, not wanting to scare her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated before whispering, "Emily." Keanu smiled gently. "I'm Keanu. Nice to meet you." She looked at him with wide eyes. "You're really nice," she whispered, almost as if she couldn't believe it. Keanu just shrugged. "Sometimes people just need someone to be nice to them," he said simply. The waitress brought over a plate of pancakes, and Emily's eyes widened. She dug in eagerly, but Keanu noticed her pausing between bites, catching her breath like it was slipping away from her. A chill ran down his spine as he watched her struggle to mask the pain, her brave smile never fading. Something wasn't right. Keanu couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at him. As Emily took small bites of her pancakes, he noticed her hands trembling slightly and her breathing growing shallow. He forced a gentle smile, not wanting to alarm her. "You really like pancakes, huh?" he asked, trying to keep the mood light. Emily nodded, her smile weak but genuine. "They're my favorite. Mom used to make them every Sunday, before things got hard." She looked down, her eyes losing that spark for a moment. Keanu didn't press her, sensing that whatever she was carrying was far heavier than she'd admit. As they ate, Keanu's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, a message from his manager reminding him about the studio meeting later. He silenced it, deciding nothing was more important right now than making sure this little girl was okay. Emily noticed and gave a small, hesitant smile. "You're famous, aren't you?" Keanu raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised. "You know who I am?" he asked. Emily nodded slowly. "Yeah. I've seen you in movies. Mom always says you're the good guy, the kind of person who helps people when they need it." Keanu looked down, a bit humbled. "I try," he replied softly. Just as Emily was about to take another bite, her face suddenly went pale, and she dropped the fork onto the plate with a clatter. Keanu immediately leaned forward. "Emily, you okay?" She sucked in a shaky breath, clutching her chest, her tiny frame trembling. Keanu moved beside her, his heart pounding. "Hey, look at me. Take a deep breath," he instructed gently. A few seconds later, the episode seemed to pass, and Emily looked up at him with frightened eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Keanu squeezed her shoulder lightly. "There's nothing to be sorry about," he assured her. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was definitely wrong. The waitress approached, her expression filled with concern. "Everything all right here?" she asked. Keanu gave a tight smile, trying to keep his voice calm. "Yeah, she's just feeling a little unwell. Is there a clinic nearby?" The waitress pointed down the street. "Just a few blocks away. You need me to call someone?" Keanu glanced at Emily, whose eyes were glistening with unshed tears. He shook his head at the waitress. "It's okay. I'll take care of it." He turned back to Emily, his voice soft and reassuring. "Hey, how about we go get you checked out, just to be safe?" Emily hesitated, clearly embarrassed. "I don't want to be a bother," she whispered. Keanu gave her a warm smile. "You're not a bother. Sometimes even heroes need a little help, right?" She gave a small, shaky laugh at that and nodded. As they walked out of the diner, Keanu noticed how Emily leaned slightly against him, as if drawing strength from his presence. He guided her down the busy street, keeping his hand on her shoulder to make sure she didn't stumble. People passing by gave curious glances, but no one bothered them. When they finally reached the clinic, Keanu pushed the door open and led her inside. The receptionist looked up, eyes widening when she recognized him, but she remained professional. "Can I help you?" Keanu spoke quietly, not wanting to draw attention. "She's not feeling well. Just needs a quick checkup." The receptionist nodded and gestured to the waiting area. Keanu guided Emily to a chair and sat beside her, noticing how she kept her head low, too tired to even hold her sketchbook. A nurse came out shortly and called Emily's name. Keanu stood up with her, but Emily hesitated, looking worried. "You'll wait for me, right?" she asked in a small voice. Keanu knelt beside her, giving a reassuring nod. "Of course. I'm not going anywhere." The nurse led her away, and as soon as they disappeared behind the door, Keanu sat back down, his mind racing. Something about this didn't sit right. Why was she out here alone? Where was her mom? And why did a girl that young look so exhausted and frail? He pulled out his phone and quickly searched for missing child reports in the area, but nothing matched Emily's description. Frustration bubbled inside him, and he found himself tapping his foot nervously. Then, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert. He opened it without thinking, and his heart sank as he read the headline: "Mother desperately seeks help finding missing daughter. Last seen near downtown." Keanu's eyes widened, and he quickly clicked on the article. There was a photo of Emily, looking far healthier and happier, along with her mother's desperate plea for information. He felt his chest tighten as he realized just how serious the situation really was. Before he could process it further, the nurse reappeared, giving him a sympathetic smile. "She's asking for you," she said softly. Keanu nodded, forcing himself to remain calm as he followed her into the room. Emily was sitting on the examination table, her legs dangling over the edge. She looked up at him with a small, tired smile. "I knew you wouldn't leave," she whispered. Keanu walked closer, brushing a gentle hand over her hair. "Never," he replied. The doctor stepped in, holding a clipboard, his expression serious. Keanu braced himself for the worst. The doctor glanced at Keanu, then at Emily, his eyes softening as he approached. "Hi there. I'm Dr. Mason," he said gently. Emily gave a tiny wave, clearly trying to stay brave. Keanu stayed close, his presence reassuring her. Dr. Mason glanced at his clipboard before meeting Keanu's gaze. "She's severely dehydrated and extremely fatigued," he explained. "But that's not all." Keanu felt his stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" he asked quietly. The doctor hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully. "She has a heart condition. It's serious, likely congenital. I'm not sure how long she's been managing it, but without proper treatment, it's life-threatening." Keanu's heart sank as he glanced back at Emily, who was tracing patterns on the examination table with her fingertip, lost in thought. He forced himself to stay calm. "What kind of treatment does she need?" The doctor sighed. "She needs surgery, soon. But the bigger problem is that she's not registered as a patient anywhere in the system. No insurance, no medical history. It's like she doesn't exist." Keanu's jaw clenched. He looked at Emily, wondering how much she knew. Carefully, he crouched beside her, giving her a soft smile. "Hey, Em, where's your mom?" he asked gently. Emily hesitated, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. She works a lot. Sometimes she forgets to come home," she whispered. Keanu's heart twisted painfully at that. "What about your dad?" he pressed, hoping for a better answer. Emily just shook her head, her eyes fixed on the floor. Dr. Mason cleared his throat. "We can't legally hold her here without a guardian's consent. If you're able to contact her mother, it would help." Keanu nodded, determination hardening his resolve. "I'll take care of it," he promised. As they left the clinic, Emily clutched his hand, her fingers cold and trembling. Keanu guided her to a nearby park bench, deciding to keep things light for now. "So, you're an artist, huh?" he asked, nodding toward her sketchbook. Emily's eyes brightened just a little, and she nodded. "I like drawing people when they're not paying attention. They look more real that way." Keanu chuckled softly. "You're good at it. I saw that sketch you did of me." Emily blushed, looking down. "Sorry. I didn't mean to be creepy." He shook his head. "Not at all. You caught me just right." Lost in thought. A sudden gust of wind made Emily shiver, and Keanu immediately took off his jacket, draping it around her shoulders. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "You're really nice," she whispered, as if still trying to believe it. Keanu smiled softly. "Sometimes, people just need someone to look out for them," he replied. Just as he was about to ask her more, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen. A new message from his assistant, Lisa. "Keanu, did you see the news?" They're looking for a missing girl named Emily. Please tell me it's not the same one you mentioned earlier." Keanu felt his chest tighten. He turned to Emily, who was flipping through her sketchbook absent-mindedly. Taking a deep breath, he knelt beside her again. "Emily, do you know if your mom's been looking for you?" he asked carefully. Emily froze, her fingers stilling on the page, her eyes filled with guilt. I didn't want to be found," she admitted. "She's better off without me. I just make things harder for her." Keanu frowned, struggling to keep his emotions in check. "Why would you think that?" Emily wiped her eyes with the sleeve of his jacket. "She's always tired, always stressed. I hear her on the phone talking about money, about how she can't afford anything. And when I get sick, it just makes everything worse." Keanu's heart broke as he listened, realizing how much this little girl had carried on her own. He took her hand gently. "Emily, your mom loves you. She's probably worried sick right now." Emily sniffled, fighting back tears. "I just didn't want to be a problem anymore." Keanu wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You're not a problem. You're a fighter. And fighters don't run away." Emily looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with vulnerability. "But what if I go back and it's still too hard? What if I just make her more sad?" Keanu cupped her cheek gently, wiping away a stray tear. "Then we face it together. You, me, and your mom. You don't have to carry this alone." As Emily leaned into his embrace, Keanu's phone rang again. This time it was Lisa. He picked up, his tone firm but calm. "Yeah?" Lisa's voice was urgent. "Keanu, the news is everywhere. The mom's pleading for help. She just wants her daughter back. Should I contact her?" Keanu glanced down at Emily, who was watching him anxiously. He gave her a reassuring smile. "Yeah, Lisa. Find her mom. Tell her Emily's safe with me." He hung up and looked at Emily, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "You ready to go home?" he asked softly. Emily hesitated, then nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. Keanu pulled her closer, promising himself that he would see this through, no matter what. Keanu guided Emily back to the diner where it all began, knowing it was better to wait for Lisa's call than to wander around. As they settled into the booth, he noticed Emily's hands trembling again, despite the warmth of his jacket still wrapped around her. He leaned in closer, keeping his voice gentle. "You feeling okay?" Emily gave a small nod, but he could see the strain in her eyes. Trying to lighten the mood, he pointed at her sketchbook. "Mind if I see some more of your drawings?" Her face lit up just a little, and she hesitantly handed over the book. As Keanu flipped through the pages, he couldn't help but smile. There were sketches of random people, some happy, some sad, a few of stray dogs she must have seen on the streets, and even a drawing of a bird sitting on a lamppost. Each one had a softness to it, like she captured more than just their shapes. She captured their stories. One page caught his attention. It was a sketch of a woman sitting on a park bench, her head buried in her hands. At the bottom, Emily had written, "Sometimes people break without making a sound." Keanu looked up, his chest heavy. "You're really good at seeing people," he said softly. Emily shrugged. "It's easier to see other people than to let them see you," she murmured. Keanu didn't push her to explain, sensing the weight behind her words. Instead, he flipped to the next page and found a sketch of himself, exactly how he looked when she first saw him through the diner window. Thoughtful and a little sad. He couldn't help but chuckle. "You really caught me there," he said, and Emily gave a faint smile. Just then, his phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. It was Lisa again. He picked up immediately. "Keanu, I found her mom," Lisa said, relief evident in her voice. "She's been searching everywhere and is at the downtown police station. I gave her your number. She'll call you any minute." Keanu thanked her and hung up, giving Emily a reassuring nod. "Your mom's on her way," he said gently. Emily's smile faded, and he noticed the tension creeping back into her shoulders. "What if she's mad at me?" Emily whispered, fear flickering in her eyes. Keanu reached across the table and took her small hand in his, giving it a comforting squeeze. "She's not mad. She's just worried because she loves you. Sometimes love makes people act a little crazy when they're scared." Emily seemed to think about that, her eyes tracing the patterns on the table. Keanu kept talking, trying to ease her worry. "You know, I once ran away too," he admitted, surprising even himself. Emily looked up, curious. "You did?" He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "A long time ago. I thought if I just disappeared, it would make things easier for the people I cared about. But I learned that running away doesn't make the pain go away. It just leaves the people who love you feeling lost." Emily bit her lip, seeming to absorb his words. Just as she was about to respond, the diner door swung open, and a frantic woman rushed in, her eyes wild with panic. Keanu recognized her from the news article. Emily's mom. "Emily!" the woman cried, her voice cracking with relief. Emily froze, her face going pale, but before she could react, her mom spotted her and rushed over, dropping to her knees beside the booth. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she pulled Emily into a tight embrace. "I thought I lost you," her mom sobbed, clutching her daughter as if she'd never let go again. Emily's lip trembled, and finally, she buried her face in her mother's shoulder, crying softly. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. Keanu gave them space, his own chest aching at the sight. Emily's mom glanced up, finally noticing him, her eyes widening in shock. "Oh my God! You're Keanu Reeves," she stammered. He gave a small nod, offering a kind smile. "Yeah. Emily's been keeping me company," he said lightly. The woman wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. "I don't know how to thank you. I've been losing my mind trying to find her." Keanu's expression softened. "She's a strong kid. Just needed someone to remind her she's not alone." Before anyone could say another word, Emily suddenly gasped and clutched her chest, her face contorting in pain. Panic flashed across her mother's face as Keanu instinctively moved closer, steadying her. "Emily, look at me," he urged, keeping his voice calm despite the fear coursing through him. Emily's breathing grew rapid, and her mother looked helplessly at Keanu. "She's been having these episodes. The doctor said it's her heart, but I can't afford the surgery," she whispered, guilt shadowing her features. Keanu didn't hesitate. "We're going to get her help," he promised. "Right now." Scooping Emily up into his arms, Keanu pushed through the diner doors, her mother following in a panic. As they rushed toward his car, he could feel Emily's heartbeat fluttering weakly against his chest. He knew time was slipping away, and every second mattered. Once inside the car, Keanu gently placed Emily in the back seat, making sure her mother was beside her. He pulled out his phone, dialing the best cardiologist he knew. As the line connected, he spoke urgently, explaining the situation. The doctor on the other end didn't question him. He just gave quick instructions and promised to meet them at the private clinic immediately. Keanu hung up and glanced back at Emily, her breathing shallow, but her eyes half open, trying to stay awake. "Stay with me, Emily," Keanu murmured, his voice filled with determination. "We're going to fix this." Emily's mom kept stroking her daughter's hair, whispering comforting words even as tears fell from her cheeks. Keanu gripped the steering wheel tighter, his mind racing. He knew he could call in favors, use every connection he had, but deep down, fear gnawed at him. Fear that despite everything, it still wouldn't be enough. He pushed the thought aside, focusing only on one thing: getting Emily the miracle she deserved. The car sped through the city streets, weaving in and out of traffic as Keanu gripped the wheel with white knuckles. In the back seat, Emily lay with her head resting on her mother's lap, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her mother whispered soft words, brushing Emily's hair away from her face, fighting back tears with every word. Keanu's phone buzzed on the dashboard. Without taking his eyes off the road, he tapped the speaker button. It was Dr. Langston, one of the top cardiologists in the city. "Keanu, I just got your message. We have a surgical team on standby. Is the girl stable?" Keanu glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing the fear etched on Emily's face. "Barely. She's struggling to breathe. We're about 10 minutes out." Dr. Langston's tone grew more urgent. "I'll prepare for immediate assessment. But Keanu, if her heart's failing that rapidly, we'll need a donor. It's not something we can just arrange." Keanu tightened his grip on the wheel, determination burning in his eyes. "Just do everything you can. I'll make the impossible happen if I have to." Emily stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering open as she tried to focus on Keanu's voice. "Are we going to the movies?" she whispered, her mind foggy and weak. Keanu forced a smile, glancing back at her. "Yeah, kid. The best one yet. Just hang on a little longer, okay?" She gave a tiny nod, her lips curving into a faint smile before her eyes closed again. Emily's mom broke down in sobs, pressing her lips to her daughter's forehead. "Please, baby, stay with me," she whispered desperately. As they pulled up to the clinic, medical staff rushed out with a stretcher, guided by Dr. Langston himself. Keanu jumped out and carefully lifted Emily into his arms, carrying her as gently as he could. The doctor gave him a quick nod, assessing the girl with professional calm, despite the urgency. "She's critical. We'll do a full cardiac assessment immediately," Dr. Langston said as they moved inside. Emily's mom tried to follow, but a nurse gently stopped her. "Let them work, ma'am. We'll take good care of her." Keanu placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "They'll do everything they can. I promise," he said softly. She looked at him with wide, teary eyes, barely able to speak. "I can't lose her. She's all I have." Keanu swallowed the lump in his throat, his own heart aching at the helplessness in her voice. "She's a fighter, just like you. Don't give up on her," he whispered. Just then, Lisa appeared at the clinic entrance, out of breath but focused. "Keanu, I called in some favors. The story's spreading like wildfire online. People are donating for her surgery, and a few organizations are already stepping up." Keanu gave a faint nod, his mind racing. "Good. But money won't mean anything without a heart donor." Lisa hesitated, pulling out her phone. "One of the reporters is already covering it live. Maybe we can reach out through the news. Make a public appeal?" Keanu's gaze hardened with determination. "Do it. I don't care how many cameras show up. Just make sure everyone knows how much time she has left." Lisa nodded and hurried off to handle the media, while Keanu stayed with Emily's mom, who was clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they waited for any news. Finally, Dr. Langston came back out, his expression serious, but not hopeless. "She's stabilized for now, but her heart's too weak to sustain her much longer. We've put her on life support, but we need a transplant. It's the only option." Keanu's jaw tightened, frustration and fear battling within him. "How long does she have?" he asked, barely managing to keep his voice steady. Dr. Langston hesitated. "Maybe a few hours. We're checking national and international donor registries, but matching her blood type is going to be difficult on such short notice." Keanu looked at Lisa, who was already on the phone with the news station. He knew time was slipping away, and his heart pounded with desperation. In one swift motion, he grabbed his phone and opened his social media account. Within seconds, he was live, his face filled with raw emotion. "Hey everyone, this is Keanu Reeves. I know this is sudden, but I need your help. There's a little girl named Emily who's fighting for her life right now. She needs a heart transplant, urgently. If anyone out there knows of a donor or can help in any way, please come forward. We're running out of time. I can't let this little girl lose her fight. Please share this. Spread the word. Help us find a miracle." As he ended the live stream, he saw thousands of comments flooding in instantly, people offering prayers, support, and pledges to spread the message. Emily's mom wiped her tears, staring at Keanu with gratitude and disbelief. "Why are you doing all this?" she whispered. Keanu looked down, his own eyes glistening. "Because sometimes, life gives you a chance to make a real difference. And I won't let her story end like this." Just then, Lisa came running back, her face pale but hopeful. "Keanu, we just got a call from a hospital 2 states over. There's a match. The donor is a young boy who passed away earlier today. His parents agreed to donate his heart." A heavy silence fell as the weight of that news sank in. Emily's mom sobbed into her hands, both in relief and heartbreak for the other family's loss. Keanu pulled Lisa aside. "Can they get it here in time?" Lisa nodded. "A medical helicopter is already on its way. They'll be here within the hour." Keanu let out a shaky breath, his eyes fixed on the clinic doors. Hope flickered back to life, but fear still gripped his heart, knowing that nothing was certain until Emily was out of surgery and safe. Time seemed to stand still as Keanu, Emily's mom, and Lisa waited anxiously in the hospital corridor. The faint hum of medical equipment and the hurried footsteps of doctors created a tense backdrop. Emily's mom sat hunched over, her hands trembling as she whispered silent prayers. Keanu stayed close, his gaze fixed on the operating room doors, refusing to let fear take over. A few minutes later, Dr. Langston appeared, still in his surgical attire, his expression both serious and hopeful. He approached slowly, wiping his hands on a sterile towel. "The helicopter just landed. The heart is here," he announced, and a wave of relief washed over everyone. Keanu's shoulders finally relaxed, but the tension remained. "How long will the surgery take?" he asked. Dr. Langston hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It could take several hours. We have to move quickly, but carefully. Her condition is critical, and there's no room for error." Emily's mom sniffled, trying to hold herself together. "Please, just save my baby," she whispered. Dr. Langston gave her a reassuring nod before heading back inside. The doors swung closed, leaving them alone once again. Keanu guided Emily's mom to sit on a nearby bench, offering her a water bottle that Lisa had brought earlier. "She's strong," he said softly, trying to keep the hope alive. "She's going to make it." Tears continued to stream down her face as she looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "I can't believe you did all this." "For a complete stranger," she murmured. Keanu looked down, his jaw clenched with emotion. Sometimes you just know when you're meant to be there for someone. Emily has that spirit. That fight. "She reminded me of someone I used to know," he said quietly, his voice laced with pain. Lisa touched his arm gently. "The news coverage is exploding. People all over the country are praying for her. Donations are pouring in. And the family of the donor, they reached out. They wanted to know who the heart was going to." Keanu's eyes softened. "Did you tell them?" Lisa nodded. "Yes. The boy's father said that knowing his son's heart would give another child a chance to live gave him some peace. He just asked one thing, that Emily knows his son's name when she's ready." Keanu swallowed back the knot in his throat. "She'll know. I'll make sure of it." Hours ticked by painfully slow, and the tension became suffocating. Emily's mom dozed off on the bench, exhausted from the emotional whirlwind, while Keanu stayed awake, his mind replaying every moment since he found her on that bench. He couldn't shake the thought that fate had put him in that diner at just the right time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Langston emerged from the operating room. Keanu and Lisa immediately stood up, and Emily's mom woke abruptly, her heart pounding with dread. The doctor's tired face broke into a small, relieved smile. "The surgery was a success," he announced, his voice warm and reassuring. "Emily's new heart is beating strong. She's stable and in recovery." Emily's mom broke down in grateful sobs, covering her face with her hands. Keanu let out a deep breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, a rare smile breaking through his own tension. Lisa hugged him tightly, whispering, "You did it, Keanu. You saved her." He shook his head softly. "She saved herself. I just helped her believe she was worth saving." A few hours later, once Emily was moved to a private room, Keanu quietly entered, finding her fast asleep, hooked up to monitors that showed a steady heartbeat. Her mom sat by her bedside, holding her daughter's hand and whispering words of love and gratitude. Keanu approached slowly, not wanting to intrude. Emily's mom looked up, her face still streaked with tears but glowing with relief. "She's going to be okay, because of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Keanu just smiled gently. "She's a warrior. You raised her strong." Just then, Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around sleepily before spotting Keanu, and a soft, tired smile appeared on her face. "Hey, superstar," Keanu greeted, keeping his tone light. Emily blinked slowly, as if trying to remember everything. Did we go to the movies?" she whispered, her voice hoarse but alive. Keanu chuckled softly, pulling a chair closer to her bed. "Yeah, something like that," he replied. Emily looked at her mom, confusion clouding her eyes. "Mom, am I okay now?" Her mother stroked her cheek tenderly, nodding through her tears. "You are, sweetheart. You're going to be just fine." Emily's gaze shifted back to Keanu, a hint of fear lingering. Did I make it?" Keanu squeezed her hand gently. "You made it, kid. You're tougher than you think." A tear slipped down Emily's cheek as she looked up at him with a faint smile. "You stayed with me. You promised," she whispered. Keanu nodded, his own eyes glistening. "Always." The room was filled with quiet relief and unspoken gratitude. As the sun began to rise outside the window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, it felt like a new beginning. Not just for Emily, but for everyone who had been touched by her story. Keanu leaned back, exhaustion settling in, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. Emily was safe, and despite everything, hope had won. Sometimes, fate just needed a little push in the right direction.